Hello and welcome to your show Political Landscape of the 19th of April 2024. Today we are with Professor Michel Chossudovsky, and I would like to remember that he is a researcher on nuclear war since more than 20 years. And he's talking about its multiple dimensions regarding historical links, strategic and geopolitical. Also, he is covering is criminal features. So we will talk about that with him today. And I would like to let you know that it's in April 2022 that he was on the show, and he talked about the fact that since Hiroshima 1945, humanity has never been so close to an atomic war. Today, Professor, I would like to ask you what we can understand about the real goal of United States right now regarding Soviet Union.
Well, I think I have to go back in history, but I should emphasize that the use of nuclear weapons in the present context would, and we are at a very dangerous crossroads, the use of nuclear weapons, including in relation to the confrontation between US, NATO, and Russia in Eastern Europe, but also in regards to the Middle East war theater, would inevitably lead to escalation and the end of humanity as we know it. The use of nuclear weapons, the collateral damage is humanity in its entirety. And then numerous scholars and analysts have confirmed this. The nuclear weapons cannot be used in a way which one uses normal weapons in the conventional war theater. And I think that many of our politicians, heads of state, heads of government, including including people like President Macron, etc., they are totally unaware of the impacts of war which would evolve towards the use of nuclear weapons. And that applies, to the use of nuclear weapons by Israel against Iran. Now, what I intend to give you is, in a sense, first of all, certain historical dimensions. And the evolution from World War II to the Cold War era, and then to the post-Cold War era, and to the present. Because there have been certain redefinitions of nuclear weapons ideology, what the US government calls the nuclear posture review. But first of all, if I go back to August and September of 1945, we had two explosions in August. One was Hiroshima and the other one was Nagasaki. And that was part of the Manhattan Project, and that Manhattan Project was directed by Oppenheimer in coordination with the US War Department. So it was the US War Department, today it'd be called the Pentagon, but in those days it was called the US War Department. On September 15th, 1945, they released a series of secret documents. It was identified as a doomsday blueprint, which consisted in wiping the Soviet Union off the map. And it occurred within a bit more than a month of Hiroshima, Nagasaki. I should say that Hiroshima, they used uranium, and Nagasaki, they used plutonium. And there were specific purposes for that. It was to evaluate the performance of the plutonium and uranium bombs. I should mention that the Manhattan Project started in 1939 with the participation of Great Britain, United Kingdom, and Canada. And as far as Canada was concerned, it's because Canada had very sizable reserves of uranium. Now, if we flash forward, those two explosions, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, what happened? Literally wiped these two cities directly off the map, totally off the map. And that in turn led to, as far as Hiroshima was concerned, it was more than 100,000 deaths. Now, the next phase, that is something which people know about. Although I should mention that the film on Oppenheimer doesn't mention it. It doesn't get into that, which I think is it really is crucial. When the film was passed in Japan, they said, well, they forgot the impact on Japan. Of course, it was a crime against humanity, and it's now being obfuscated by Hollywood. But the other project, which is in a sense far more diabolical than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, is that of the doomsday blueprint of a nuclear attack directed against the Soviet Union. And it was formulated during World War II at an earlier phase, but it was confirmed with top secret documents on September 15th, 1945. Those documents, you can consult them. And what those secret documents, what they indicate is that there were several scenarios, but what was envisaged was to identify some 66 urban areas in the Soviet Union, which at the time was a country of approximately 200 million people. They lost about 25 million in World War II, but here we are, 66 urban areas which would be targeted by 200 atomic bombs. And that was at a time when the United States had the technology. Nobody else had it, okay? Nobody else had it. But I should say that just the fact that this project had been was known to the Soviet Union. I don't know the exact details on that, but the Soviet Union knew that the United States were preparing to wipe the Soviet Union off the map, and they started developing their own atomic bomb technology. But the thing is that if you look at this plan, first of all, it was a time when both countries were allies, and they are already there to wipe the Soviet Union off the map just about 2 or 3 weeks after the end of World War II, officially, okay? It was the beginning. They signed the treaty with Japan in early September. And then 2 weeks later, there we are. We have secret documents which were declassified some 30 years later. They were declassified in the 1970s. But I mean, we've had half a century to examine those documents, and nobody in the media will mention them, and the politicians will simply ignore them, and they probably don't even know that they existed. So that's the background. Now, if I go up to the present, we have several different periods. We have the period of we have the period when Soviet Union and the United States were allies. Then we have the Cold War period, which starts in 1947 and goes through various phases. Of course, it comes to the end when the Soviet Union is abolished. That was in the late 80s, early 90s, okay, 91, 92. And then we have another period, which we call the post-Cold War era. And that technically starts in the 90s, but the actual shift in US nuclear doctrine starts in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. And it's a rather confusing and misleading from a scientific standpoint, because it focuses on what are called the tactical nuclear weapons. And the tactical nuclear weapons are small, so-called mini nukes. They are earth penetrating. They have an explosive capacity between 1/3 a Hiroshima bomb up to 12 times a Hiroshima bomb. So they're not negligible in that regard. But the thing is that they are presented even in the documents which are presented and then go into the military manuals. They say that the mini nukes, the tactical nuclear weapons, are harmless to the surrounding civilian population because the explosion is underground. And then it says, well, if civilians are not affected by these nuclear bombs with an explosive capacity of up to 12 times the nuclear bomb, well, then we can use them, okay? And they say, well, we can use them. The explosion is underground. I verified all the parameters of this, and it's a little bit like taking a packet of cigarettes and changing the label and saying smoking is good for your health. And then they say this is the label that we're going to stick on the B6111 and the B6112, which are tactical nuclear weapons. And we'll say, well, this bomb is safe. This is a peacemaking bomb. It's safe for civilians. And mind you, they defined this bomb in relation in regards to the so-called preemptive nuclear war. Now, preemptive nuclear war it's a military concept. It means we're developing nuclear weapons which will prevent people from attacking us. So it's to ensure our self-defense. So it's self-defense. It's not intended to be used as a bomb against an enemy country, which is a nuclear power state. It is largely intended to go after non-nuclear states, which in one form or another threatening the United States. Preemptive, not preventive. Now, what this means is that the nuclear bomb, from a propaganda misinformation perspective, is presented as something which it's not. Okay, it's a weapon of mass destruction, and then they come up and say, no, this is a peacemaking bomb. It's used to defend ourselves against countries like Iraq who might attack us with conventional weapons. Now, what happens then is that some of these low-yield nuclear weapons are integrated into the conventional, into the weapons of conventional warfare. So they redefine They say that certain categories of nuclear weapons can be used in the conventional war theater, and they even say you don't even need the authorization of the President of the United States, God forbid. There's a 3-star general there who is responsible, could be responsible for that. I don't think that would ever happen. But the thing is that they've changed. They've in effect they've changed the nature of this bomb, not in terms of its impacts, but it's given it a sort of a nice name, you know, preventive or preemptive, and then they'll say this bomb is good for your health, or if it's a pack of cigarettes, that's what they say. This bomb is a peacemaking bomb. Now, there's a whole literature on that. I don't want to get into it, but it is very crucial because it provides the decision makers with you know, nobody really wants to blow up the planet, but they have a bomb which is there, which is not going to blow up the planet. I can tell you that even the use of a low yield mini nuke would necessarily lead to escalation, and it could threaten the future of humanity, whether it's in the Middle East or whether it's in Eastern Europe, and consequently, first of all, they've been playing around with concepts, and politicians haven't the foggiest idea as to the nature of the decisions that they're taking with regard to these nuclear weapons. And when they're told and they're briefed by the security advisors that tactical nuclear weapons are safe for civilians, they said, well, yeah, let's go ahead and use them. Now, next phase.
Yeah.
This is important. In 2002, you had this nuclear posture review. The following year, there's a meeting it's the meeting in Nebraska at Strategic Command Headquarters, and it is held between the 6th and the 8th of August 2003, and it is a meeting between the private sector, military-industrial complex, defense contractors, and so on, and broadly the nomenclature of the Pentagon, the CIA, etc. And what was envisaged at this meeting is a de facto privatization of nuclear war. It's a meeting which was not well publicized. I managed to get some indications of what was going on there. It started on the 6th, not commemorating. They're military people. They want to pursue the technology. So, but ironically, they take those 2 or 3 days there to have their meeting on building the privatization of nuclear warfare, and then a few years later, and this happens. The announcement happened with the Obama administration. And what does Obama announce? He announces precisely, without going into details, he announced that the US Congress had allocated an amount of $1 trillion strictly to nuclear weapons. Strictly to nuclear weapons. Now, under the Biden administration, it's gone up to 1.3 trillion. Bear in mind, 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. So we're not talking about small numbers. think of all the hospitals and schools and everything that you can build there with 1.3 trillion. And from my understanding is that they have put a focus on the developing. They haven't put a focus on delivery mechanisms of bombs. They've put a focus on the small nuclear bomb because ideologically it's upheld as a peacemaking bomb. And so Obama can say, well, we have $1.3 trillion assigned to peacemaking bombs, and that's because we're against nuclear weapons. Absolute nonsensical stance. But there you have 1.3 trillion dollars assigned to nuclear weapons. And as I said, these small nuclear weapons, harmless to civilians, they have a whole series of options. You can increase the yield. In other words, you can go and bomb it with a higher intensity or a lower intensity. It's a little bit like having a BMW car, and then you have all the different options as to what you want to do with this bomb. But the thing is that from the point of view, and that we understand perfectly well, from the point of view of the military-industrial complex, this is a piece of cake because they have a contract, they have a budget and they are incited to produce these nuclear weapons and at very, very high prices. And they're not necessarily functional. Mind you, none of these higher yield nuclear weapons are functional because inevitably they lead to blowing up the planet. And they are, of course, nuclear weapons on both the Russian side and the American side, which could be 100 times a Hiroshima bomb. And any kind of analysis leads to the inevitable conclusion that any kind of deployment of nuclear weapons would lead to the end of humanity as we know it. In other words, the collateral damage of using nuclear bombs is humanity. Bear in mind. And we must go back again to the historical origins of that. And that goes back to the Manhattan Project. And the Manhattan Project then leads to a whole series of nuclear weapons scenarios, which border on the well, they confirm essentially that the United States is intent upon bombing the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union may also have its own plans for deployment and use of nuclear weapons. But what is significant there is that the Manhattan Project initially provided a monopoly to the United States, and it also then led to the arms race. There wouldn't have been an arms race had there not been a Manhattan Project with a scenario of bombing the Soviet Union. And the number of cities actually went up in the course of the 1940s. And we were still under the Truman presidency. And there have been various studies. There was a Cold War list of 1,200 targeted cities. And that was, in fact, even before the Soviet Union had acknowledged that it had undertaken the necessary text to declare the fact that it was a nuclear power. So there we are. We are at a very dangerous crossroads, and we are particularly at a dangerous crossroads when scientists And mind you, even the scientists of the Manhattan Project who now run the bulletin, the bulletin of the atomic scientists, they're coming out with absolute idiotic statements. And I'll read them to you so that you understand what is at stake. But the latest statements, well, this is a statement from 2003, and they say, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists seeks to provide relevant information about nuclear weapons, climate change, and other global security issues. And then it says, we are at the brink of a precipice. I fully agree. That was the former President of the Republic of Ireland, Mary Robinson. So she says the doomsday clock is sounding an alarm for the whole of humanity. We are on the brink of a precipice, from cutting carbon emissions to strengthening armed control treaties and investing in pandemic preparedness. We know what needs to be done. We are facing multiple existential crises. Leaders need a crisis mindset. Now, this perspective borders on utter ridicule. CO2 is casually put forth as a danger to humanity comparable to nuclear war. It's absolute nonsense. It's propaganda. And it's intended for the public as well as the decision makers to downgrade the impact of a nuclear bomb if it were applied, even a small nuclear bomb. And I should insist, the use of nuclear weapons technology could lead to the end of humanity as we know it. I'm not saying this is not an absolute statement, but it's something people should understand. And across the land, we should pressure our governments to come to that understanding. And it's nothing to do with the dangers of CO2 compared to nuclear war. They're two different concepts. But it is misinformation to the nth degree. So that is my message to readers. We've published a lot on this, and it's all the more serious because the nuclear weapon option is still being discussed, specifically with regard to Israel.
Thank you very much for this week, and thank you for everybody for listening. And we would like to invite you to visit the website of globalresearch.ca, and you can become a member of the website to receive information. And thank you for anybody who would like to support as well Lux Media financially. You can always send some money by going on luxmedia.info. You can click on the red bottom, and you can just send whatever will be comfortable for you. Thank you very much.